Welcome to our webinar series, 5 Steps to Transform Office 365 into a Digital Workplace. This webinar is about Step 1, establishing your portal structure. I'm Daryl Trimble, CEO of SP Marketplace. We've been transforming Office 365 for over 6 years. We provide out-of-the-box workplace solutions on Office 365 and SharePoint, and we have over 1,300 organizations around the world using our products to make their employees more productive and their business overall much more organized. In this webinar series, it's really all about making it easy to do business in your organization. And if we look at a lot of organizations out there today, they've really grown organically, establishing different departments and functions within the organization. Problem is for the employee who has to look across these different departments and functions, often doing things in different ways, it looks like chaos and it is very frustrating and can be very time consuming to actually get the resources, services, and so on they need to do their job. We'll show you how to take this situation and leverage Office 365 as a digital workplace to bridge those siloed departments and to create an internal business structure that's consistent and easy to use, leveraging SharePoint portals and creating an employee hub type structure that really makes it easy for that employee to get things that they need to be productive. So the 5 steps in this webinar series really cover the internal structure that we're talking about today, defining communication processes and news and information within that structure, organizing your resources and documents within the structure, providing a consistent way that employees can get internal services, and finally, ways to integrate business processes into this to form this digital workplace. So today we're really going to be talking about the base structure. So if we take a look at it, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about Office 365 deployment and challenges, and how you can take Office 365 and put it into the context of your organization. We'll talk about what really we have found out to be the missing piece. It's not so much the technology, but the need to define that internal business structure across your organizations and get different departments and functions to really buy into it. We're going to introduce you to the concept of not just an intranet, but an operational portal structure. We'll talk about the types of portals that exist in that intranet structure and how you can map it to your organization structure. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about how to evolve to a digital workplace, how to educate, plan, and implement in a phased approach. So let's take a look at Office 365 itself. With Office 365, we find almost all the time and very consistently that there is a set of maturity phases. People start out with just moving the Exchange server to the cloud. People are still using email and Outlook, and they don't really know there's much difference about it. Then all of a sudden they get introduced to doc sharing with OneDrive, some team collaboration perhaps with groups or teams. Then the organization tends to find out, hey, we really need to kind of have a structure around this. They start to establish an intranet structure, start to put in operational integration with different systems in the back end, and then move towards business visibility because everything's now kind of connected together. Now, the key thing here is where you're going to get your ROI out of Office 365 depends on how far along this maturity phase ladder that you get. But unfortunately, what happens is there's a whole bunch of different things that become hurdles of going up these steps. And what we find is that a lot of people just stop right after the email and doc sharing and never get any further. And a lot of this is because really they don't know how to do it, they don't know how to apply the different services and so on. So if we take a look at actually what's included with Office 365, it's pretty incredible what Microsoft is doing. They're actually establishing a common platform now to create this digital workplace. And they're actually consolidating things like user management and user sign-on and security in this platform, and other things such as how you actually track data, whether it be in SharePoint lists or in databases, and bringing that together. And bringing together with that, how you manage content, whether it be news and information or whether it be documents. That is all built in. They're starting to put together a common way to do processes and workflow. Obviously, they've also put out many ways to do collaboration with teams. And then finally, they've built really a connectivity model that allows it to connect into your different systems out there. On top of this, they have brought out tools and services. Obviously, starting with the MS Office tools we all know, with email and Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but they've also added in capabilities around file storage with OneDrive and portals and content management with SharePoint, even bringing in Planner and groups and other things as well, all the way through to business intelligence with Power BI. It really is one of the most comprehensive sets of front office tools on the market. And with that connectivity, they're also bringing in process applications, not just their own, like Dynamics, but Salesforce and ERP systems and so on, and allowing that to connect in to this digital workplace platform. And of course, many of you may be familiar with the Office 365 groups or teams. They've also brought out too. Now, one of the issues about all of this is that many organizations, as I mentioned, stop and really hit major hurdles in adoption. And a lot of it's because users look at this and go, this is overwhelming. There's just too much here for me. I don't know, what to use where and when and so on. Well, there's part of the reason for that is actually how it's deployed. And oftentimes what we see IT do, and even the organization itself, they just don't realize, they think it's this really cool technology, but they've never stepped back to say, how are we going to use it? How are we going to organize for it? And a lot of times it's just unloading it and saying, hey, there it is. And in some cases, it actually can turn into anarchy with people creating sites and team sites and doing different communication sites and SharePoint sites and so on. And we call it chaos in the cloud is what often happens. It's because they never step back to say, how should we use this? How should we organize for this? And this is really where we see a lot of the questions coming in, like how do we migrate our documents to the cloud? Where should we put them? Where do we put policies and procedures? What about forms and everything and contracts? Where do we put videos and imaging? And then a lot of times they just take that file server and make one site and just duplicate what they had on the other side. And that's really a waste. And how do we use SharePoint as well, or OneDrive? Then also, what services should we use and when? When should we use what tools? And which team collaboration? Should we use groups? Should we just let everybody create teams whenever we want? Of course, they're going to go put documents in there, so then all of a sudden documents are spread out all over the place. What about security? How do we manage that? How do we make sure that the HR employee documents are secure, or other things that other people shouldn't get at? The whole governance issue. And is there any standards for discussions or chat and so on? And what happens is two things. Either it turns into chaos, or IT and the organization is so confused about what to do with it, they just don't turn anything on, and they end up paying for Office 365 and using only 10 or 15% of it. And that's really sad, considering what is out there. So really, why is there so much confusion about this? Well, it really comes down to, again, how the organization grew organically, and that each department or each function has a tendency to manage things in their own way. They have their own places to put policies or procedures, documents. They buy their own systems. They have their own processes out there. Even the way they provide services, maybe IT has a help desk, but HR, you have to call them. And if you're in the field, that makes it really tough because you're sending emails or calling them and you don't know what happened with your request or your question. And it gets really frustrating out there, especially for employees trying to look across all of this. So the key thing is Why is this way? Quite frankly, it has nothing to do with technology. It has everything to do with how you run your business. It's really because you never stepped back and defined how you're going to do business internally. You never brought all these departments together. You never brought all the functions together and said, look, we need to do things consistently across our organization. And a lot of times, this is basically almost like a realization after the fact. And it's so simple. The key thing is you need to define how your organization is going to handle these things consistently across departments. Now, before, that was very hard to do. Okay, you could put in place things, but there really wasn't the technology to support that. And one of the things too is, a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, they have customers, and they realize that one of the best practice of customer services is to make it easy for your customers to consume and get your product, your services in a consistent way. And we see it applied all over the place to banking. You walk into a bank branch, there's the tellers on one side, that's where you do your transactions. There's desks over there, that's where you talk about loans or other services. And whether you're in Paris or whether you're in San Francisco, it's all the same. And it's all the same across banks. You walk in the door, you don't need to know where to go. You step right up and do that. That's applied to fast food. It's applied to retail. It's why the most successful stores are set up very consistently in the same way. The problem is your employees are actually customers to a number of departments in your organization, and you're not applying this to your own organization. And that's part of the problem. So this is really here is what's needed is you need to have the organization do things in the same way. It's almost like an orchestra. You know, an orchestra makes beautiful music when they all are singing from the same song. But if each area, the horns, the strings, and percussion are all from different areas, it sounds terrible. Well, that's the same way here. So one of the things you need to do as part of this digital workplace initiative is you need to step back with your C-levels in many cases to define an internal business structure in the context of your organization. You need to define a consistent way to deliver news and information. Okay, how are you going to distribute news from IT or from HR or from different parts of the organization? Are you going to use email for some of it or post it somewhere for somebody else? Define a consistent way and some process and procedures for how news, announcements, alerts, and events are going to be put out there. Resources, how documents are organized. You need to have some consistency across the organization on where you're putting policies, procedures, and forms. You need to know that those are there so that they can be consumed by employees. So make it easy to find. Because if you don't, then don't think that you're going to actually be able to enforce those policies. Also, where you're storing media, the latest logos, the latest versions of things, and reference information too. Services. Why should your employees have to do calling on the phone, emails, and basically doing a chaotic set of things to find out what a question or something from service organizations like IT, facilities, HR, finance? Do things in a consistent way. Put in a consistent service request system. Even processes. There's a lot of employee processes out there, and they're not just HR. There's time off, there's expenses, there's travel requests, there's could be capital asset requests and other things. Put those in a consistent place, even if they're on different systems to start with. And then finally, define some rules around how people establish teams and use some of the collaboration tools in Office 365 out there. The key thing is consistency across departments and functions in the context of how people work. Okay, and that's establishing that internal business structure. Now, the great thing is you have a way to implement that now. If you establish it, you have a way to implement it. It's called a digital workplace. And it consists of the front end tools, all the tools that your employees use every day. It needs to be integrated with it. It needs to be just part of it. They can't be flipping in one word processor and then, another online meeting tool and have to sign in at different places. It all should work together. And that's what Office 365 does. The second part of it is you need to establish a portal structure. A portal is a destination for a group. It's a place that they share things. It's a place that they organize things. And give these groups, whether it be a department, whether it be sales, whether it be even a project group, give them the capabilities and the structure to actually organize things. Have predefined portals for different levels of the business structure. Make them flexible for change so that it can support both a safety department and a finance department, for instance, too. And have them be able to be self-supported by the departments themselves. Make sure that they're power user capable for different departments and groups so that they're not so complex that they don't get adopted. So this is really what we see as the key thing, and this is why we started with structure in the whole digital workplace discussion. And really what you have an opportunity to is you don't have to blow everything up the way it is in your organizations. You can actually bridge siloed departments with a common communication and internal services structure delivered by a digital workplace on Office 365. So one of the things that we've done, and we've done this 1,300 times, and I'm not trying to sell you our products. I mean, in the end, I think you'll see that our products will be useful for you. But I want you to know how we've succeeded, what we've done, what we found that works in delivering a digital workplace. You first have to understand the 4 business pillars of an internal business structure. It's information, news, events, announcements, even contacts in the form of an employee directory, ability to get to people. The second part is resources that employees use, whether it be policies and procedures, making sure they get the latest ones of those, or forms, or other documents, could be functional documents, such as a PowerPoint reference card, or the latest benefit information out of HR. Media like logos and images, and even providing things like frequently asked questions and knowledge base that drive self-service around resources and information. Another pillar here is services. Make it consistent in how people get questions answered, problems solved, requests put in, and be able to actually see the status of the request without having to call somebody or contact somebody through a self-service type of portal. And then finally, make it easy for them to get to processes that they need to get to every day, whether they're on the same system, another system, or not. And try to automate as many processes as possible, leveraging that digital workplace. And what you'll find is that actually you can drive adoption of Office 365 by implementing a digital workplace or an operational portal structure. And so start to put all these tools and services into the context of your organization. And really, it's that internal business structure that you're really bringing it into, and now it makes a lot more sense on where you're going to use OneDrive and where they're going to use Planner from what places, because you can put in place an operational portal structure on SharePoint that actually is in the same context of your structure and how people work. So let's take a look at that and see how you can do that. So we're going to show you how you can define your operational portal structure and take it from chaos to organization. Now, one of the things we've learned in doing, again, 1,300 deployments out there of a digital workplace or transforming Office 365 into a digital workplace is that it really does start with this structure. And there is a kind of what we call a best practices internal service structure from a portal perspective that we found works very well. And again, these are typically SharePoint sites. We'll also show you where teams and groups fit into this as well, but over the entire webinar series. So this is what we call an operational portal structure. And it starts at the top with an intranet. The intranet is really kind of the organization homepage. Now, it also might be the homepage for a division or business unit as well too. Again, they may be in essence their own organizations. But with the intranet, this is really where all news and information comes together. It's also the point where employees can come in and navigate to the different parts of the organizational structure that they want to get resources from or even operate from within if they're in a function or a department. So if we take a look at the intranet, of those pillars, it's really the first pillar. It's where information comes together, and it's a destination for information. It's not, email where it flies by. They can always come here and see what's going on and what the latest things are. It's also a place where you can establish cultural things and social sharing and so on too. Now, the second level here is something that a lot of organizations just don't have. They haven't even thought about it, but this comes back to that customer best practices. We have a next layer that we call Employee Central or Employee Services. And what we've done here is we've said, hey, let's not worry about what department or function it's in. If it's an employee-facing service or that type of thing, let's bring it together in a common place or a place to consolidate things. So the first one we'll talk about here is Doc Central. It's a central place to get policies, procedures, and documents actually pushed up from the different departments and consolidated here so they can come to one place and find what they need on frequently used things like policies, procedures, or forms. But also it's a place that they can go and do a search and actually capture information from the different functions and departments below Doc Central in the structure here. So Doc Central, again, is the place for resources that the employee might need out there. The second area here really relates to the third pillar. Make it easy to get services and from the different parts of the organization. And this is where we suggest that you really have almost like a central service request capability. Now, this could link out to the IT help desk, but also you may want to put in place in the departments below simple service request systems in the different departments that could actually link up to this, and an employee could go here and submit a service request to any department and see the status of it in one place. And then finally, Process Central. Now, Process Central is not where all the applications reside. It's really links to the different applications out there that are frequently used. Time off, expense requests, and so on. Too often these get put down into the department, so the employee has to think, okay, now which department do I have to go for this? But what we're saying is put links in two different processes that are frequently used by employees in one central place. Don't jam them up all on the intranet page. You can have links to frequently used things from the intranet page, but have a process central that employees know that they can go to and most likely be able to get at any process that they would have to do as part of their job as far as general employee facing things. So that is the top structure here. Now we get down to the different types of groups and departments. And really this is where we go in and we say, this is not just a team site or a peer-to-peer portal. There are different types of portals out here. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later, but we've seen that it makes sense to establish department sites that actually have two parts to them. An employee portal, which is like your bank branch. This is where an employee goes in and gets services, resources specific to that department. So if I go into IT, it's actually I could do a service request or help desk request from there as well. But they also have a knowledge base. They also have a resource library that has things that the IT staff feels that their customers, the employee, would want to get at. Think of it as the brochure wall at the bank branch. So it is a place that the employee can go, whether it's in IT, HR, or marketing, that looks very much the same, has the same components, but the content is different. And then on the other side of that, you still need a place that department staff, even though they're a service department, can share things, that they can share documents, they can share task tracking and calendars and so on. And in fact, this SharePoint site is a great place right here to link directly to that group's OneDrive, that group's team or group, the planner and everything else. That way they don't have to go over to the drop down and see the 50 icons and then maneuver their way to the IT group. They're in their portal. It's the place they're going to organize things as well as share things and collaborate and link to those Office 365 services related to their group. Much more intuitive, much easier to do, and you're going to see the use of the Office 365 services skyrocket when you do it this way, because it's in the context of how they're working. And then finally, for division or groups, you may actually have another intranet with departments underneath that as well. So we've talked about kind of these portals, but really when we're looking at this, there is only several different portal types here. We have what Microsoft calls a communication site or an intranet home site. And again, this is a place for news, announcements, and navigation to services and resources out there. And you can build it with using the standard communication site from Microsoft, or you can actually have much more enhanced ones with some of the out-of-the-box intranet sites and so on. But they're going to need to also provide these other portal types and fit in with an overall operational portal structure. We've already talked a little bit about Employee Central, but this is again a consolidated site for different components that employees need to get across different departments. We've talked about the department site here and groups. Now, what gets confusing then is how do I align this with what Microsoft's provided kind of out of the box with Office 365? Well, if we take a look at it, the communication sites that they have and team sites actually fit the top one here for the intranet, as well as the group for the team site down below. But really, we see a lot more people using Teams for groups or the Office groups, 365 groups. That's nice because it's accessible and very integrated with Outlook. Teams tends to be a little more isolated, or Yammer. So the key thing is these are peer-to-peer groups, and these tools are built for peer-to-peer teams. Service departments like IT, HR, and so on, while inside the department themselves may be peer-to-peer, they provide services and need to share information and resources with their customers. Whereas somebody like a project team or sales could probably get away with a peer-to-peer team portal. Ones like IT, HR, facilities, and so on need that service component there. So let's take a look at these two components in much more detail because there is nothing out of the box right now for that with Office 365. So if we take a look at, first of all, the employee service here, and it could also be related to projects because it's a cross-department thing. We see that, again, we talked a little bit about Help Central, Doc Central, and Process Central, and they actually integrate with the other departments down here by allowing, for instance, the employee to make a service request, and it's actually being done from the service request here, but it's shown up here, and the status is up here. And the same thing with documents is the policy might be created in the HR department down here, but published up here such that the latest one's always here, and the employee's not going down in the middle of HR stuff down there, as well as Process Central. So again, making it easy. This is really in the eyes of the employee, not from the department out, but really the employee in. But the second thing that's a little harder for people to understand is these department portals. They really are made up of two portals. There is the service portal that an employee can come into. They come in, they can answer their own questions with self-service. They can get at documents. And in fact, it's not documents in the same libraries these folks use. It's actually a library called a resource library in here that is in particular for customers, that being the employee of the department, to access. And what that does is it makes it a little more simple for non-technical people. They don't have to understand all permissions and everything. Everything in here is only for the staff here. Everything in here can be gotten to by the employees as well. Employees can make service requests, which pushes over to the staff side. They can have their own announcements and news, which this department can, again, populate. and get their own answers from knowledge base and see different events and so on related to this department. Again, it's the bank branch. So a department portal or service portal here is really two portals in one. It's typically, we at least do it in one SharePoint site, and there's actually driven by permissions. When they come into this department, it looks at and says, are you part of the staff? If not, I'm going to push you over here and kind of lock you over in this area. If you are part of the staff, then you can come in here and work with your team as well. And the nice thing is, if you apply it right, that when an employee comes in, it will be laid out the same. There's service requests, knowledge base, and so on. And then whether you're in IT, HR, or marketing, you will get to see all of this in the same kind of layout, the same information as well. And that's the whole concept, going back to that customer service best practices. So let's talk about how you might apply this to your organization. If we take a look at a typical organization here is, you have a structure, and the structure is there because that's the context of how people are organized and how work is organized in the organization. Now, Microsoft and a lot of others talk about it's all about collaboration. You don't want to, get locked in a structure, but the bottom line is you do work from a structure, and there's a reason there's an org chart out there and why they've got it broken down this way. So if you want to succeed with Office 365 and a digital workplace, you need to be aware of this. And I'm not saying you can't work outside of the structure, because that's really where collaboration is driven. But you also have to recognize that work is done in this structure and services are delivered from within this structure. So the question is, how do you apply all these different portals and services to your organization? Well, the first thing that you need to do is you need to really start to kind of categorize the groups in your organization. Which groups are actually internal service groups? They actually provide services like a bank, and that they really need to have a service model in the digital workplace. Because after all, the digital workplace is all about making it easy to do business inside your organization, and services is a core part of the business, internal services. So these groups provide services and resources internally. They may even be a shared service across divisions and so on. Typically, we see IT, HR, administration, quality, legal, marketing is a service as well. Even safety is a service, even though it's a regulatory thing. And all of these groups really need to operate under a service model, which has that the service portal and the staff portal. Then there are operational groups. Now, operational groups are really around things that are the core operation of your company. They might be related to sales, to delivering services to your customers. They're customer facing often, or their product creation, engineering, manufacturing, support. So these groups are all about that type of thing. They're not providing internal services so much. They're really providing and more operational to outside the organization in many cases. And so these we find often much more are peer-to-peer. In other words, sales is interacting with themselves. Somebody's not coming in and asking them for service. Of course, their main service is to provide revenue to run the whole company. But again, they're much more peer-to-peer in the way that they operate. And then finally, we've pulled out another area here called business units. Now, you may have these upper groups inside business units, but a lot of times we're now seeing the shared services model where the internal service groups are actually go across different business units too. But business units tend to be more tightly knit operational units that may even operate independently. They end up being divisions or product units around a product line or even a region of the world. And here we find that there's a combination of service and peer-to-peer with these two, and almost a subset of the overall organization. And they may also matrix in, especially when you get the regions, those type of things, with some of the other units. So the question is now, and really what what is key to this is what we call operational portal mapping. And it's mapping your organization to those operational portals. And the key thing is, whether you realize or not, part of a digital workplace is you need to have some type of portal for each one of these organizations. It's a place that they go into to actually operate and actually access the resources, the services, everything else within this. And so you can actually take and say, well, IT is a service organization, so we need to do a department portal for them. At the top level, there's the intranet. That's kind of a no-brainer. But also Division and Division 2 are pretty autonomous, so they may need their own like sub-intranet into this thing, and they may even have portals beneath them as well, too. So you can see that what we did is we took this operational structure and started to map it to the portals out there. So along with that, that's really how you set up your structure. Now, this is the part where I have to pay for the webinar, but just so you know, and you might want to check it out, even if it's to see what they look like, is we have these portals already built. They're out-of-the-box portals that can bring structure to your organization. And what we've done is we've actually taken and pre-built SharePoint sites that actually operate as these types of portals that you can then deploy out to your organization as well. So we find that it doesn't matter whether it's a business, whether it's government, whether it's a nonprofit. These really do very much be able to map into this and create a complete operational portal structure. And one of the things too that you're going to find here, and this is what leads to our next set of webinars, is once you have this structure, those questions of where do I use what services, where do we put our documents and other things become much more clear. And that's why we started with the whole structure here. And so we find that, it starts to define what groups you need or what teams you need out there out as well. And obviously you're going to have non kind of organizational teams as well, your revenue idea group or your project teams. But you find that from the different portals here, you start to use the teams for the collaborative side out there, and it also starts to define what OneDrives you're going to need and where you should put documents, whether it's in the Doc Central, shared up there as part of your top intranet, or if it's the documents that your customers are going to get at, so HR resources library, or if it's an internal library that is for HR staff. It very much makes it clear on how to structure these things and gets you away from doing the mistake of, we got our file server here and we're going to just put everything in one place. You don't need to do that anymore. You can put it where it makes sense, where people are working, and that you're not going to have everything in one place that becomes a Frankenstein file structure out there. And you can use things like tags, meta tags, and search to actually make a lot of these documents easily accessible, but they're used in the group and the context of the work that's going on. So when we take a look at it overall, what you're going to see from going to a digital workplace is incredibly higher employee productivity because you now organize things. You've now defined how you're going to do business internally out there. You're going to see a lot lower costs because people are spending their time, focused on their main job, not looking for things, looking for services, wondering what happens on the chaos. But you're also going to lower costs overall across every one of those organizations. Your service function should be able to get along and have less resources and spend time on other more productive things than answering the phone and figuring out where document A is for employee B. And you're going to have a lot less risk because if you know where things are and they're well organized in a consistent way, any legal liabilities, those type of things will be backed up by a set of documents, a set of information that is out there. And policies will be their latest versions and followed as well. And it really gives you a foundation to grow the organization and be able to bring in new business units, new types of business, to hire people faster, to onboard them faster, and so on, because it's all much more intuitive. So I hope this has been helpful. I do invite you to go to our site and really see the rest of this. Learn about defining communications processes and news and the best way to do that, organizing things, and really drilling down into the next levels of how to set up this digital workplace on Office 365. You can learn more about the products that we provide, and it really accelerates the movement to a digital workplace. And we have a lot of best practices built in. And we have those departments already defined and a lot of the self-service portals and so on. It's part of what SP Marketplace does, and it integrates with all of your Office 365 going forward. So learn a little more about what you can do with Office 365 and learn how you can accelerate it with a digital workplace and an operational portal structure. And then finally, you might want to take a look at our solutions that we've built and are used all over the place to really take Office 365 and get the most out of it. Thank you for taking the time. You can learn more about our products and us at spmarketplace.com and see the next step in the webinar series here.